Well, you can't blame anyone really because it's all connected. It's called globalization. Okay, we have trade systems. We have some countries that produce products and others import them. So it's not, you can't really blame, but there might be a point in time where you actually start to blame countries. Okay, it's all about emission gaps. Okay, and what happens in the future. Okay, so let's have a look at the top CO2 emitting countries. Okay, and we look at it's called CO2 here, but it's also about equivalent. Okay, CO2 equivalent emissions. Okay. Anyway, this one is from fossil fuels and cement production. Megatons of CO2. Have a look at the countries. Okay, and this is averaged from 1750 to 2020. United States top, China second, Russia third, then comes Germany, UK, Japan, India, France, Canada, and a whole chunk of other countries. Italy, South Africa, Iran. Okay. And it shows you the percentage of the total, and 1/4 the United States. All right. So that's information number one. Okay. There's a similar story here, but a time series. Okay, time series of annual CO2 emissions by world region. Okay, and this source for this information is Our World in Data. And I can recommend that you have a look at this webpage because you can choose different countries, you can play around and explore the emissions. Okay. So that shows you a time series. You can see how the emissions have increased since the start of the Industrial Revolution, with big changes since the 1950s. Dramatic changes. This is an exponential change. These are exponential changes, and you know that the world population has almost exponentially increased. Okay, that is reflected here, the increase of the population. Okay, but it is a stack plot. All contributions are added up. And you can see if you look at the different colors, blue United States, you can see that initially leading, and so, but in recent years it sort of stayed, looks like it stayed constant. Okay, the thickness of this layer did not change much. So what did change is the European Union maybe decreased a little bit here, and okay. And look at China increased. Okay, this slice got bigger. Okay, and Asia also increased. Okay, so we get different trajectories or different trends in different world regions, but overall you get a big increase and a little bit of slowdown in recent years, and this is by the attempt to reduce CO2 emissions. Okay, the United States and EU are now at 30%. Significant increases in emissions by China, India, and other Asian countries. Okay, this is how it looks like. Now we can look at emission gap monitoring. Okay, let's have a look at the monitoring. Ignore these red squares for a minute. Okay, let's have a look here at Australia. Okay, now each of these little graphs, the horizontal axis is a time axis, essentially going to the end of the century, and there highlights a 2050 as the goal to reduce CO2 emissions to zero. Okay, and then what they do here is they look at current trajectories. For example, Australia, well, has a really good trajectory according to, if they continue it, okay, and therefore is on target to reach the Paris Agreement. If you look at Brazil, which is next to it here, it's not so good, but sort of, it's going downward with a downward trend, but will not reach the target. Okay, so you can actually look at targets, the gaps, okay, the emission gaps for different countries. And now there are a number of countries where it looks not good at all. Look at China. Okay, this is China. Looking at emissions going up. And this is why it's marked here as it will not achieve the target. India doesn't look good. Emissions going up. And you can also see that the excess value are different. So you can actually compare the significance. So this one here on the axis in India goes from 0 to 5,000. And in China it goes from 0 to 15,000. So you can also compare the significance of each country. For example, Australia is only 1/10 of India in terms of emissions. Look at the Russian Federation here. Russia is not on track, increases of CO2 emissions, and Turkey is not on track. Okay. Saudi Arabia is also not on track. And so some countries are on track, others, well, there is no evidence of a reduction of CO2 emissions. Okay, so China, India, Russia, and Turkey are significantly off track to achieving the Paris Agreement. Okay, now let's have a look at CO2 emissions by fuel or industry. Okay, where do the CO2 emissions come from? Okay. And it's again a time series starting from 1750. Okay. And you can see coal is the biggest, okay, has the biggest contribution in terms of emissions. Okay. Followed by oil and then gas. Okay, and gas also sharply increasing. Lower emissions come from cement production and other industries. Okay, so all these are the bad guys. Coal, oil and gas production are the bad guys. So you can't reduce coal by increasing gas. Okay, gas is not a solution. Okay, because it also involves significant emissions of CO2. Okay, and then if you go to this webpage, you can actually change the country. So you can click on this, not now. Now it will not do anything. This one is just a still image, but if you go to the webpage of Our World in Data, you can change the countries and look at individual countries. Okay? This is for the entire world. Okay, and indeed you can look at who produces coal. You can look at who are the top thermal coal producers. Thermal coal is mainly used for energy production. That's the link to the CO2 emissions. Okay, thermal coal production. If you look at it, half of it, China produces half of the thermal coal on Earth. Australia 4%, South Africa 4%, Indonesia 8%, India 9%, US 13%. Okay, rest of the world 12%. Okay, that's a big slice, but China plays a big role. Okay, as a thermal coal producer. So who produces biggest, who are the biggest oil producers on Earth? Okay. This is a table here of oil production by country in 2021 in million barrels per day. The United States is the leader. Yeah, the US is the leader, followed by Saudi Arabia, Russia, and then Canada, Iraq, China, United Arab Emirates, and Iran. Okay, but by far the leader is the United States. Okay, so you can look at the countries that are required to have the biggest change. Okay, the biggest change, because these countries have committed to the Paris Agreement. Okay. All right, gas. We can also look at the top gas producers of the world. Leading country is the United States, followed by Russia, Iran, China, Qatar, Canada, Australia, Kenya, Norway, Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and then come a bunch of other countries. Okay, you can see how it plays out, which countries are involved, or which are the top countries in the world involved in the production of oil, gas, and coal. And it's the same names popping up. It's the US, Russia, China, and some other countries. Okay. So, study questions. What does CO2 equivalent stand for? What's actually the goal of the Paris Agreement? Which sectors produce the largest greenhouse gas emissions? What are emission gaps? Which countries are the top producers of thermal coal, oil, and natural gas? And which countries are not on track to reaching the Paris Agreement? Okay, thanks for watching.